We're a faith-based, Christ-centered organization. And when we deal with those who are struggling with addiction, we introduce them to the gospel of Jesus Christ, because we believe it's not what is the answer to addiction, it's who is the answer.
And welcome back to Centerpoint. Here's our correspondent, Blynda Lane, with a special guest on the subject of drugs and drug addiction solutions.
Joining us now is the president of Adult and Teen Challenge, Gary Blackard. Gary, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be with you.
The opioid crisis is spiraling out of control in communities across our nation. Can you tell me what you're seeing and more about the model of your organization's take on drug and alcohol recovery?
Sure. Well, as you mentioned, it is out of control. We're seeing millions upon millions being affected by the crisis in our nation right now. And really, it's driven today by the fentanyl issue and the fact that you can produce fentanyl much cheaper, the fact that it produces a better and more qualified high, if you would. And so users are just tapping into this drug. And unfortunately, we're seeing overdose after overdose as a result, because fentanyl can kill you very easily. And so our nation is facing this epidemic at a critical time, including other things going on in the world. And so what Adult Teen Challenge does is we look at the whole person. We're a faith-based, Christ-centered organization. And when we deal with those who are struggling with addiction, we introduce them to the gospel of Jesus Christ, because we believe it's not what is the answer to addiction, it's who is the answer to addiction. But we look at biological as well. We look at sociological, we look at psychological, but most importantly, we do look at the spiritual. And so we look at a host of programming methodologies, including introducing them to Christ, as I stated, but also counseling, group counseling, individual counseling, work development, etc. So that's where we're at today as Adult and Teen Challenge.
Would you say that there is a spiritual issue in our country and that the drug epidemic is really just a symptom of that?
Oh, absolutely. You know, evil is evil is evil. And we believe that the U.S. right now is facing a crisis of evil. And the drugs is just a symptom of what's happening across our nation. People are hurting. People are looking for answers. And so they're turning to alcohol use. They're turning to substance use. Really, they're turning to anything to fill the void in their lives. And this is nothing new if you read your Bible and you understand what's happening in the battle for or good and evil, or the Lord and Satan, and what happens when evil attacks humanity. People are struggling to find the cure. And the problem is the real cure, as we know it, is Jesus Christ.
What would you say, Gary, to parents watching of signs they could look for in noticing behavioral things that might be pointing to their child starting to dabble into drugs?
It's a great question. You know, as a parent, I certainly, when we raised our kids, we were on the lookout for sure. But I think parents need to really understand who the people their children are hanging around are. And what they'll see typically when a child starts to go astray or starts to use, their friends change. And sometimes the entire set of friends changes. So be on the lookout for the relationships that your kids have. Isolation. And sometimes the kids start to become isolated and intentionally become isolated from groups and from their parents. So be looking for any signs of isolation with your children. Be looking for what they're reading, what they're listening to. A lot of them begin to listen to music around drug paraphernalia and the culture of what it means to be in drugs. So as parents, when we look at, you know, what's inputting into our kids' minds, and then the external environments that they're in, becomes very critical as parents for us to really observe that but also more importantly, get involved in your kid's life. Make sure you're asking the right questions. Questions like, are you using? If you really have a concern with your child using, ask the direct question and listen for their response and observe their body language. Many parents are afraid to ask that question, but we have found that the parents who do ask know their children well enough to really understand their children may be lying to them. So certainly have those direct conversations.
Gary, this has been so informative. Thank you for your time. We're so appreciative.